Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are HangingOnToHope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given. This podcast episode discusses the details of domestic violence. If this episode becomes triggering while you are listening, practice self-care and turn off the episode. If you need to talk to someone, 1-800-799-7233. All the links are provided in the show notes.
Hi, everyone. This is Brenda J. Welcome to Real People, Real Voices, where people get to have a voice, and some for the first time. These are mini podcasts that focus on healing. I am so excited. So without further ado, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Brenda J. Today we have Lora Harvey on the show. I had the honor of listening to Lora's story at our Impact Church Women's Bible Study, where she was a speaker that week. She's an abuse and cancer survivor and has an incredible story of strength to share today. So welcome to the show, Lora.
Hi, Brenda. Thank you so much for having me. I am really blessed and honored to be here.
Well, hi, Laura. This is Karen. I already introduced myself, but I'll do that officially on the podcast.
Hi, Karen. Nice to meet you.
Yes. So from your testimony, you've been in multiple abusive relationships, which is what our podcast is all about. So do you mind telling us a little of your abuse story?
Yeah, sure. So it begins back when I was about 15. I grew up in the church and was invited to go to one of the deacon's wives, invited me to a Bible study. And so that's what I did. I started studying the Bible with her. And I won't go too much into it, but I ended up being sexually assaulted by the deacon. And so that kind of created, what would be considered church hurt. And, I don't remember a time in my life when I didn't believe in God, but that really had an effect on me. And so when I was 18, I left the church. I moved out of my parents' home, and I ended up getting married at 18. That was my first abusive, I guess what you can consider relationship. He currently is an alcoholic, and he was abusive to me. I won't go too much into that relationship just because he is the father of my two adult children. But what I can tell you is the fights and arguments that we had. He would sit on me and hold my arms down, or he would hold me up against a wall, basically because I would try to get away from him and he wouldn't allow it. So that was my first experience in being in an abusive relationship. And we were married about 6.5 years. And then when I left and took the kids, I was single I was unmarried for about 8 years. And I had relationships in that time, obviously not any that worked out, but my second husband I met in 2010. That's really where kind of the biggest amount of trauma has come in my life was with that marriage. He was emotionally, mentally, verbally abusive to both me and the kids. Of course, not at the very beginning, it worked up to that. He is what you would, I guess, consider to be a classic narcissist. He systematically pulled me away from friends and family, and he would lie about just petty little things that really had no necessarily any consequence to anything, but I would catch him in little lies. And when someone shows you who they are, believe them. For some reason, and I don't know why, I would excuse little things. In my head, I would make up like, oh, it's not always going to be this way, or he didn't really mean that, or, maybe it was something that you did, or he just loves you. And so he's trying not to, hurt you or create a scenario where you're going to get hurt. I don't know what I was thinking.
Just quiet and
I just
enable it almost
along with it. looking back on it now, of course, they say hindsight's always 2020, but he really did everything he could to destroy my relationships with each of my children, with family, friends, and he was pretty successful with a lot of what he tried to do. And then in 2014, we were living in Wyoming at the time, moved us to Arizona. And I'll say moved us to Arizona. It was a joint decision, but I really feel like he made it to sound as though it was a joint decision. I didn't really ever want to leave, but I had finished getting my master's degree. And so it was, hey, we need to move away from here because the job opportunities are better elsewhere in bigger cities. So we moved to Phoenix, and this is where his birth father and stepmother and half-brother live. Other than that, I have no family, no friends. I don't know a single soul outside of him, his family, and my daughter who moved with us. So at that point, that's when things really started to get bad. Things like he accused me of having an affair with a coworker when that absolutely did not happen. I had to quit a job because in my position and in the corporation the company that I was working for, they had an annual membership meeting and it varied from coast to coast. So each year it was either on the West Coast or it was on the East Coast. And so the year when I was working there, the meeting was taking place in Vancouver, Canada. So I had to go get my passport, which I never had. And it was always planned that we would go get our passports together because we were going to start traveling. And so I had to go get my passport because I had to travel for work. And that created a huge fight because we weren't doing it together. And then when I was actually in Vancouver, he called me telling me that he had gotten onto Craigslist, I guess it was, and was looking at Craigslist for people who were posting in Vancouver about being in a hotel. And he said, and I know this was a lie, but he said that he found a posting from a woman fitting my description that was married, that was there for work, that was just looking to have a fling. I mean, it was just crazy.
Wow. He's almost like paranoid, it sounds like.
Well, and then he kept me on the phone all night long. And so by the end of that week, I was exhausted because I got no sleep. And yet I was working this huge event. It's an international event. So I'm working this huge event and got no sleep. So it's just, it was things like that. I had to leave that job because it required me to travel. And he was not okay with that. He was not okay with me traveling. I, at one point, was making a little bit, not by much, but I was making a little bit more money than he was. And so he would jump from job to job because he got upset that I made more money than him. And then in 2017, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was diagnosed in June. And by November of that year, of November 2017, my marriage was over. So from June to November was just a complete chaos storm of horrible events that I was trying to list out and talk to all just the highlights of things that happened. And I've got 2.5 pages. Mm-hmm. And so we don't have enough time to go into all of those things, but he destroyed a flat screen TV. He destroyed his metal toolbox. He threw dresser drawers at me because he kicked me out of the master bedroom and I wasn't allowed to sleep in the master. I had to sleep in the guest room. And so because I wasn't moving my things fast enough into the other bedroom, he was taking drawers out of the dresser and throwing them at me. And it really got to the point that I just became very apathetic toward him. He threatened to commit suicide. So I'm sitting on the couch one night and I get a phone call and it's him. And I thought he was at the house, but I was like, well, maybe he left. I don't know. So I get this phone call and he tells me that he's in the garage and he just hopes that I have a great life and he's just sorry for everything. And so I got up and I went to go see what the heck is he talking about? Every entrance to the garage is locked. I mean, even from the outside. And I told him, I'm on the phone with him. And I said, I'm going to call the police because I could hear his truck running in the garage. And I told him, I said, I'm going to call the police. And he said, don't you dare call the police. And I said, no, if you're not going to let me into the garage, I'm going to call the police. And he's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. So I hung up and I called the police because I couldn't get in there. He's sitting in the garage with his truck running. I'm on the phone with the police and he comes walking into the house, like strolling in, like no big deal. Nothing's going on. And he says, who are you on the phone with? I said, I'm on the phone with the police. And he was coming toward me. Just then the police knocked on the door and he looked at me and he said, don't you dare let them in this house. Well, of course I let them in. I was like, I don't know what is going on here. I'm freaked out. I'm upset. So he had to go on to a 72-hour like psychiatric hold or whatever. And those were probably the 3 most relaxing days.
Oh,
Like where I could take a deep breath.
yeah.
I knew what was coming when he got home, but in those 3 days, probably 3 of the best days that I had in a long, long time. And so, yeah, I mean, it was insane. It was really insane. I ruined his sex life is one of the biggest things that he talked about. I'm going through chemotherapy. I've lost all of my hair. I have no strength. I'm sick. And he's upset because he was in his early 40s and he's still sexual. And I have ruined that for him. It got to the point where literally I was just begging him, go find a girlfriend. I don't even care. Just go find a girlfriend. Because I just wanted him to leave me alone. And in that conversation, I'm crying. I'm so upset and I'm angry and I'm just do whatever you feel you need to do. And with my daughter, who was 16 at the time, with my daughter in the room, he then proceeds to tell me in very graphic detail exactly what he would do with a girl. And I mean, to this day, it still is shocking to say it out loud that here I am, his wife, who's very sick and trying to survive this. And he's telling me, well, if I do go find a girlfriend, this is what I'm going to do. And she's going to let me. And it makes me just almost physically ill to think about it. But so
He was never like supportive of what you were going through with
he was
cancer is a major deal.
Well, he made it seem as though he was supportive to everybody else. People called to check on me to see how I was feeling. If they didn't ask him how he was doing, he would get upset because don't they know that I'm taking care of you? Don't they know how? And I understand. Caregivers probably get very little care themselves, but he would just get very angry. Don't they know what I go through? Don't they know what I do for you? You wouldn't be able to survive this without me. So to everybody on the outside looking in, he was the perfect husband. He was the one who took care of me. He was the one who took me to all my doctor's appointments. What they didn't know is he would go to chemotherapy treatments with me and we would sit there and not say a single word to each other. And he showed people what they wanted to see or what he thought that, this is what the ideal husband would look like.
Right.
But behind closed doors, he was vicious with his mouth. And so.
Yeah, they wear the mask, they isolate.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, everything you're saying is just classic abuse.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, I'm so sorry you had to go through all that.
Well, I'm not. I'm glad I had to go through that because honestly, if I didn't go through that, if that's not the process, I don't know that I would have ever come back to the Lord because at this time I believed I wasn't following Jesus. I wasn't living a godly life and he was is an atheist. And so going to church or being in a community of believers was just not an option. And so had I not gone through all of this, really survived this, I don't know that I would have ever gone back to church.
So you ended up divorcing him?
Yeah. So I had been planning on once I felt better and once I was past it and recovering, I was going to leave. Wasn't sure exactly what that looked like or how I was going to do it, but I just knew that was my plan. And that was really kind of what I was hanging on to, like, just get through this because, your life is going to be different. But the final night, my daughter really just kind of sped things up for me. So it was probably a week or so before this, we had gotten into a huge fight. And like I said before, at this point, I had become very apathetic. I didn't respond to him. I didn't react. Mm-hmm. He just got very angry about it. And he looked at me and he said, I hope the cancer comes back and kills you. And it was in that moment that like something in me broke. And so it was probably about a week or so after that, we were fighting about something again. And my daughter jumped in and said something. And he had the TV remote in his hand, and he just balled up his fist around the TV remote and almost just like started to kind of cock his arm back. And I stood up and stepped between them. And I said, I don't know who you think you are or what you think you're doing, but you will absolutely not ever, ever touch my daughter. And she had walked out from behind me and walked around, and I thought went to her room. Well, she called the police. And so when the police showed up, then they made him leave. And that was the last time I physically ever saw him.
Wow.
And yeah. And so 1 week later, so that was on November 10th, 2017. A week later, November 17th, was the day that I had my lumpectomy. And that was the day that we had agreed he's moving everything out. And so he did. He moved out the day I had my surgery and moved back to where he came from.
Wow.
He told me, he said, if you leave me, I will bury you and I will destroy you financially. And he made good on that, because my name was on everything. But yeah, like it was probably a year after we had split up, he filed personal bankruptcy. And so then all the creditors started coming after me because my name was on everything.
Wow. Well, after years of stress and abuse and being an amygdala hijack, which is a constant fight or flight reaction, it's really common to have health conditions arise. I myself have Hashimoto's disease, an autoimmune disease where my body attacks my thyroid. Since I've gotten out of my abusive relationship and working on my physical, mental, and spiritual health, my body is slowly healing itself. It does take the effort of reducing stress in your life, exercise, therapy, lots of rest. Those are just a few examples. You just told us a little bit how your physical symptoms and how they coincided with your abuser's departure. So you're saying you had the lumpectomy and he was gone at the same time, and it was like signified your healing, right?
Yeah, I think it was a God thing. To me, it just had to be, because I don't believe in coincidences. But so the day I had my lumpectomy was the day that he moved out. And so I really kind of relate those two things together. The day the cancer was cut out of my body was the day he left.
Yeah.
And later I was talking to my oncologist, because in my head, I didn't understand that the day that I had my lumpectomy also was the day that they consider, because they test the cells around what they remove. And so if the cells don't come back cancerous, then you're considered what's called NED, no evidence of disease. And so I didn't realize that was that day. I was waiting for, I don't know what I was waiting for. I was waiting for some date in the future, maybe after radiation or something. I didn't know. And so I was talking to my oncologist, and he said, no, he said, the day of your lumpectomy was the day that you were considered NED, no evidence of disease. And that just, that could only be a God thing, that it was that day that I was going through that process on the day that he moved out. And he was gone by the time I left the hospital. He was gone, and I left the hospital with no evidence of disease. Yeah. So, I mean, certainly that signify, or that means something to me. But then since then, I've had to go to therapy. I probably should be better about exercising. I haven't been lately, but, we can all, I think at some point probably say that there's times in your lives where you can be better about that.
Oh, yeah.
And then I do art and writing, and just really I take everything to God, everything.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, is what are some of the things you've done to heal since that time?
You actually paint, right?
Yeah. Paint, and I write, and like gone to therapy. I did go to Celebrate Recovery for a short time. Work issues kind of kept me from finishing that program, so I do want to go back. But realistically, the biggest thing that has helped me with my recovery is surrounding myself with Christ-centered people that always point me back to Christ, because he is the central figure in my life. And he wasn't for many years. Like I said, I left the church when I was 18, and I was gone for 23 years. And those 23 years were kind of hell on earth. Now, I'm not saying since I came back to Christ, that life has just all of a sudden gotten easy. And that's not what I'm saying. But I have a peace.
Yeah.
I have a strength that I didn't have before.
Right.
So I knew the day that I could pray for my ex was a day that was pretty monumental for me. When I got to the point where I could actually pray for him and not feel bitter or angry or anything about it. I could honestly, truthfully pray for him. That was kind of a turning point for me.
Yeah, that's big after everything you went through with him.
Yeah, wow. Well, we'd really like to thank you so much, Laura, for being on the show. Is there any gold nugget of advice or anything else you'd like to tell our listeners to bring hope and healing?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this and I didn't really know kind of what I wanted to say, but I came across this, and I had actually heard this years ago, but I came across it again and I thought it was really important. And so there was one time I read that you should measure yourself and who your partner is by 1 Corinthians 13, the scripture in the Bible where it talks about love is patient, love is kind.
Yeah.
But you should replace love with your name or replace love with your partner's name. So read it as though you're saying, Laura is patient. Laura is kind. And as you go through there, am I those things? Is my partner those things? And not with the expectation that they're going to be perfect in everything, but really, are they those things?
Yeah.
And is Jesus the center of their life? And then another thing I read, Cole Gordon, but this is attributed to him. He wrote, your body will express its exhaustion before you become ill. Your partner will whisper their desires to you before you break up. You will be forced to hear the screams if you don't listen to the whispers. And I think that was so powerful, because if you don't stop and listen and really just quiet yourself, quiet your thoughts. And like I said before, people will show you who they are. You just need to believe them. And so if you don't quiet yourself, stop making excuses, stop justifying, really look at what's in front of you and look at the truth and what someone has shown you and what someone has told you, that has power. Words have power.
Yeah.
So if you don't stop and you listen to the whispers, it will become a scream that you're forced to listen to and that you can't ignore.
Yeah.
That's really good.
That is good.
Wow.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and being brave enough to be a voice to speak out against abuse. I mean, the fact that you're able to share and encourage other people that have been through that, I mean, God's definitely going to use that. So we definitely appreciate you sharing your story.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you again for having me.
Yeah.
Seriously, thank you.
Oh, thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing your story. Next up, we have Traci. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Brenda J. Today we have Traci on the show. She's a verbal, mental, emotional abuse survivor. Welcome to the show, Traci.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about your marriage and the abuse that you suffered from.
So I got married in 2010, and I had a daughter from my previous relationship, and then we had a son. And shortly after my son was born, about 6 months afterwards, that's when the abuse started. It was little things like you don't keep the house clean, to not wanting friends come over when he was home, to the point it was every day. It was verbal, mental, emotional. I think the worst he ever said to me was, nobody ever likes you. They only put up with you. Nobody cares about you. And it was chronic. And then I knew I needed to start getting out, because then he started to do the abuse towards my daughter, who at that time was 16. So he would tell her that she was worthless. She was, going to grow up to be just like his sister, who was a drug addict. And it was just not things you want to say to a 16-year-old. And we ended up moving to Arizona in 2015, and my daughter ended up moving to Washington State to be with her dad. So that's what I put up with for almost 4 or 5 years.
I'm sorry. Thanks. So how did it end? How did you end up getting out?
It was a 2-stage process. What a lot of people don't tell you when you're in an abusive relationship, it doesn't matter if it's physical, mental, verbal, but sometimes you feel like you're in a cage and you're in the corner and you're clawing to get your way out. And I was going to do whatever I had to do to get out of that marriage. So the first step was obviously let my daughter, even though she was only 17, move with her dad. It was hard, but I decided to do it.
Yeah.
The second I found out,
hard.
it was really hard. I mean, I'm an empty nester.
Yeah.
I missed my daughter's senior year of high school. I missed her prom. So luckily I was there for graduation, but she was in good hands with her dad. She still lives with her dad, and all three of us have a really great relationship. So I'm extremely thankful for that.
But you did what you felt was best for her because you were in that abusive situation.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't know is Annalise has had her own personal trauma, and I'm very proud of her because she stepped up to the plate 3 years ago and started seeing therapy, and it's increased her relationships with friends, families. Her and I have a better relationship than we've ever had. And she realizes Mom made mistakes. I've apologized for those mistakes, but she realizes that when you're in that situation and you don't see an end, you're going to do whatever you have to do. So she knows I did not send her off to Washington. Then I found out at the end of 2014 that I was losing my job or I needed to move here to the state of Arizona. So that's what I did. And we lived together for about a year. And then I finally told him I couldn't do this. And I told him to leave and started raising my son with helps of friends and family on my own.
So did he leave easily or did he give you a hard time?
It's a mixed bag. He's very, I hate to say, influenced by his parents who have money, and the divorce was hell on earth. They threatened to take my son away from me. Anything that they could to do to try to prove I was an unfit mom. But I just stood my ground and I just said, no, I don't care what I have to do. But in the end, we got the divorce. It became to the point the judge awarded me more custody of my son than him. So what does that tell you now?
Praise God.
So my son and I are very close. I'm close to my daughter. So I was able to get out, and it was hard, but what do you do in that situation? You got to do what you got to do.
So how did you heal from all this? Is it still difficult for you with all the verbal abuse and things that he said to you? Do you still struggle with believing those things, or you do realize those are lies, right? How do you combat those lies?
It's a combo. My mom has mental health, so a lot of us have anxiety. So that just trigger forwards it. How I healed? There was nothing like this, what you guys are doing, available to me. I mean, in a lot of ways, verbal, just domestic violence, it doesn't matter if it's on a man against a woman or woman against a man. It's still a taboo subject. People don't want to hear about it because it makes them uncomfortable. So what you guys are doing is bringing that subject up, which is great, and you're there for people. I learned to heal on my own. So it was just me realizing everything that maybe my mom might have projected onto me with her mental health. I had to reconcile with that and then realize all the mistakes that I've made. I had to reconcile with that.
So you took ownership of your own stuff.
Yes. And you have to.
But that doesn't make it okay what
No.
he said and did
No.
to you, though, and you do know that those were lies.
They're lies. Unfortunately, it does ramp up your anxieties. I still struggle with it today. I know they're lies, but it affects not just your everyday life. It affects your work life, your personal relationships. I have been at a point for the longest time, I didn't want to get into any relationship because what could I bring to the table? I'm very much broken. And now I am broken, but I put my pieces back together and I have my scars and I wear my badges. This is the hell I went through and this is what you're going to get. And that's my story. And
It's made you stronger.
It's made me stronger. But it's still a struggle. It's like I already have a social anxiety. So now I'm meeting new people and all I can think of in my head is, are they only talking to me because they want to? Or are they talking to me because they feel like they have to? Do they want to be my friend? Or do I make them feel like they have to be my friend. So it's just working through it. I have a great group of friends who get it, they understand, and they help me through it. So I'm extremely thankful for it. Luckily with my son, there's been no long-term effects because he was so young, but he was also another reason why I wanted to leave, because he started to tell people at the age of 4 that all daddy does is yell at my mom. And I was like so afraid he's going to go to daycare at that time and someone's going to hear him say that and they're going to call, Child Protective Service.
Yeah.
And I'm like, great. Yeah. I already know I'm in a crappy relationship and marriage. So it was a long healing process. It's been going on since 2016. And I tell everybody, just because you're out of a domestic violence relationship does not mean you're healed.
Right.
It's like you overcoming something. You need to pray to God every day, meditate, take into account that what you have is great. Take the negatives, turn it into a positive, and just try to move forward every day. And that's how I get through.
That is fantastic. But I know that your story has a little bit more. Your story has a little bit more to it than most stories that we've heard. Actually, it's different than any other story that I've heard so far of people that we've interviewed. I know this has happened. Do you want to go ahead and explain a little bit more what you've had to go through?
Yeah. So, through the years, my ex and I, we've tried to co-parent, but it's always been like butting heads. I noticed a year or two after we got divorced, he started hanging around a friend, which I thought was a little odd because my ex-husband is very, not antisocial, but he does not do well in social settings. He doesn't get friends very easily. He's pretty much happy by himself. But every time my son would go visit him, they would hang out with this friend. At first, I thought, this is great. This is nice. He's got a friend. And in 2020, my ex-husband came to me and said that he is in a relationship, and he has been for a good almost 2 years with another man. And
wow.
I kind of had an idea, but my second thought was, okay, what do we need to do for our son? And him and I have had a lot of long conversations about things that happened in our marriage. He's apologized for it, but that still does not take it away the ownership. He didn't. He knows he did it, and he knows he still has potential to do it. I hope to God he never does. But I told him the consequences of what you've done, it doesn't just impact me, it impacted everybody. I appreciate you saying you're sorry, but it still doesn't take away the fact what you did to me.
Yeah, they don't, it's hard. They don't understand their consequences and the damage that it does to families.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
yeah,
he has a good relationship with his son, but my son and I are closer, and there's a lot of things that he does that irritate my son, and I have to just remind him, at least your dad's here, your dad's present, but we talk about it, because the one thing that I've learned through all this is communication. I hit it. I hit the domestic violence like there was nobody's business. And we were on a family trip in October before we came to Arizona, and I had my cousin there and a friend, and they saw the whole truth, nothing but the ugly truth. And that's when I had actually come clean to everybody. And it is embarrassing. You go into a marriage thinking it's going to last forever, and then boom. So I believe a lot of the domestic violence came from him because it does run on his father's side. His grandfather was an alcoholic. He was very abusive. But I also believed it was because he was attracted to men. Mm-hmm. But there was pressure on him. Like I said, his sister was a drug addict, and his parents were on to him constantly. You need to get married. You need to have a grandchild. And in a lot of ways, I was that target. I already had the daughter. So marry me, get me pregnant. His job is done. And now he's confused. He cares about me. But as I like to joke, I don't have the right equipment, so to say.
Yeah.
So how do I make him happy? He started drinking when we were together, and he got really sick. And that's when he realized that this is something he needs to explore. So we have a unique relationship. I mean, our co-parenting is getting better. But, now I've got to balance his wishes because he is in this relationship. But luckily, his partner doesn't have any kids, but he's extremely great with my son. He's very patient. He understands. And he knows that he stays out of mine and my ex-husband's business. he already said, this is between the two of you and I'm not going to get into it. So I'm thankful for that.
Yeah.
I'm thankful that if you're going to be in a relationship with someone else, the same sex, please let it be with somebody who understands the situation.
Yeah.
But it's definitely different. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why the abuse happened. Again, it doesn't give him a pass. There's no way.
Right. There's no excuse
There's
for
no excuse.
abuse at all.
No.
Mm-mm.
And he needs to learn that. And my fear is that I don't want Logan growing up like that. So I think I've done a really good job of making sure he's a good kid and growing up and treat people with all respect.
Yeah, I feel just honored to have known you,
Thank you.
and to call you my friend and
thank you.
have met you because you're just classy all the way. I mean, like just your attitude and just what you have to go through and the strength that you have.
By myself.
Yeah.
I did it.
And you're raising a wonderful boy and you have a great daughter. So I just want to know, how's your life changed at all? What positive thing can you say that's happened in your life since you've gotten divorced and you've healed? You got your college degree, I think, right?
I did.
And a promotion.
And a promotion. There's a lot of good things. It's taken a while. I want to say from 2016 to 18, it was kind of just heal. Funny as it may sound, the pandemic kind of helped because we were home. One thing that I did do was purge. So anything that was related to that marriage, I just started to donate.
I did that last year.
It's very helpful to get rid of it. Therapeutic. I just started focusing, like you said, on the positive and not the negative, especially with the pandemic when you don't know what's going on. I can either make things easier or harder. I went back to school and I got my bachelor's degree in business. So that's fun.
Yeah. Congratulations. Woo!
It was not easy. And I'm working a full-time job, trying to take care of my kid. And then the pandemic hits and now I've got to work at home and do his schooling. So yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
It's over now, right?
It's over though.
Yeah.
Minus the dead every day. That reminds me. But, I just healed with my friendships. I found that I wanted no more toxicity in my life. And if I had to be in a situation, I learned to put up the boundaries. And I just surround myself with people who feel love and empath, who are doing great things like you are. So, how we met was pure accident, but I believe God put us both in the right path to be there. And I'm extremely thankful for that. I found, you and another friend by accident, and it's just been God sent.
Yeah, I felt drawn to you right away because you just immediately said, I've been abused and why didn't anything like this exist when I needed it?
Right.
The podcast and everything. And I said, I don't know, but we're doing it. That was it.
I was so happy when you said, hey, this is what we're going to do. And I'm like, all right, I'm a little jealous because,
No, but here you are. You're on the podcast. Nothing to be jealous about.
But no, I did get a better job. And with that, I've been working really hard and I got a job promotion. And just recently, I just bought my first house on my own.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
No one helped me. I did it all on my own. So it's just, every day it's not a struggle, but every day you got to get up and take account. What do I have in front of me? What can I be thankful and be creative? Sometimes money's been like really tight for my son and I, but I'm like, all right, Christmas this year, it's been really rough.
Well, that is amazing that you're able to buy a house and get your degree and do all this. And you're just thriving and you're going to be an inspiration to our listeners. I can't wait till this one comes out. And I just want to thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I try to get my story out there because, my story is a little unusual.
Yeah.
But it's all good. We're one big, as I always say, dysfunctional but loving family. So there's that.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Well, thank you again.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening, and until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.